Welcome to the Tyler Turner Show presented by the Sportscast. Today's date, November 2nd, 2020. If you haven't yet, please subscribe in all our channels, YouTube, Periscope, and iTunes. If you are on iTunes, please leave a rating and review. It'll help us out tremendously. Visit us on thesportscast.net. Also follow us on Twitter at the Sportscast1 and check out our app, the Sportscast. It is in the iOS App Store. Well, this week is going to be mostly centered around Pac-12. Pac-12 preview. I am going to talk about all things Pac-12, but mostly I'm going to talk even specifically in the Pac-12. Oregon Ducks, baby, they start this week. But I am going to go over the Big Ten schedule. I just want to kind of go back, talk about the games that happened, give you some thoughts of what I think about the Big Ten season through 2 weeks. So that's not up. Nope, that's the wrong one. Okay. Big Ten schedule. Sorry. I'm pulling up the game so I go through every single one. They're 2 weeks into the Big Ten schedule. So far it's been how can I say it? Couple notes on the Big Ten, I would say specifically. For one, Ohio State was predicted to be the best team in the conference. I don't think there was a lot of argument against that by very many people. They were a preseason top 5. They're a team that people kind of have already pegged into probably being a college football playoff contender. They made the college football playoff last year. They have one of the best quarterbacks in college football in Justin Fields. They have one of the most talented rosters. So I think it was kind of just people expected Ohio State to be good, and through 2 weeks, they're pretty good. I mean, they look pretty good. Have they looked flawless? No, but 2 weeks, weird season. Geez, Big Ten was canceled there for a while. So for them to get it back together and to look pretty sharp, I think says a lot. The kicking game, that kicker missed a couple 20-yard field goals. That part might need a little work. The defense has had a few moments in pass defense. They gave them some big plays the other day, but give it to Penn State. Penn State has some athletes on that side of the ball. That's probably the first game I want to cover, Penn State versus Ohio State. It was probably the game of the week in college football. Game day was there. It was a primetime game on ABC. I thought it was a pretty good matchup. On paper, I thought this was the toughest matchup for Ohio State. Penn State is, I think, the second most talented roster in the PAC, in the Big Ten. When I did my positional ranks, I had Penn State finishing second. Now, there is the one caveat. Right before the season, I thought that the best running back room in the Big Ten was Penn State. But then Journey Brown is out for, I believe, the season. And then immediately after that, after the first game, Noah Cain got injured. He's out for the season. So down your top 2 running backs, and no longer we considered that one of the best running back rooms in the Big Ten. And you could see that. You could really, really see that in the game. Penn State just had trouble running. They had trouble really doing anything on the ground, and it really kind of forced them to pass. And Sean Clifford in the first half really didn't do anything. He was not accurate. He couldn't get the ball down the field. He struggled immensely. Now, I will give it to him. Second half, the OC, I can't think of his name right now. He used to be the OC at Minnesota, and he headed off to Penn State. He was able to dial up some pretty good plays and that Dotson, that young wide receiver for Penn State, did some amazing things. He made some amazing catch. He made a crazy one-hand catch against Sean Wade for a touchdown. And they were able to generate a little bit through the air. Ohio State might have taken the foot off the pedal a little bit, and they didn't seem quite as dialed in defensively. But I give it to Penn State. Kurt Schrock, that's the name of the offensive coordinator. He did a good job in the second half. First half, he kind of tried to run, and unfortunately, missing those running backs, they weren't able to beat them at the line of scrimmage. They couldn't run. Then it forced Clifford to pass, and Clifford was getting pressured. Clifford was missing passes. Guys had kind of trouble getting separation. They really didn't do anything. I thought when it was at halftime, 21-6, they were really lucky it was that close. Ohio State missed an easy field goal. Penn State kind of got a break at the end, was able to get a late field goal. But the first half was very much dominated by Ohio State. It was like 282 yards to like 82 or something. It was very one-sided. Second half was a much closer half, and I would say pretty much even, but they were so thoroughly dominated in the first half, and they had such a significant lead. It was almost impossible for them to get back in the game. So Ohio State wins. The rest of Ohio State's schedule, Rutgers is better. They're not going to beat Ohio State. Maryland looked good. They beat Minnesota, but I still think they're several tiers below Ohio State. They play Indiana. Now, that is probably – let me look. Well, there's Michigan. They play Michigan. Illinois, they're going to destroy them. I'm trying to quickly go through. Michigan State won, but I still don't see. I would say, I mean, you have Michigan, you have it's a rivalry game that Ohio State's dominated for the last several years, but this century basically. But I still, they still probably have the third most talented roster, and you never know. You never know. They might be able to get a little bit of game, but Indiana's the game to watch out for. Indiana's not a bad team. They can do some good things. They've looked pretty good. They beat Penn State. They got to play, but they beat Penn State. And then they won last week. Indiana plays Michigan this week. Let's see how that game turns out. I'm very, very interested. It's kind of Michigan does not want to go down 1-2. Hardball, hear the music. And it still has Ohio State looming. I'll touch on that. But Indiana, that's an interesting game. I really don't think anyone's going to beat Ohio State. I would actually be very, very surprised if Ohio State loses a game this whole Big Ten slate. And when I mean slate, I'm talking about the 8 games plus the one-off in the championship weekend, which they'll probably be number one, playing against the Big Ten West number one. I would say the second best team is Wisconsin. But Wisconsin clearly had the last game canceled. This weekend they got canceled because of coronavirus. Graham Mertz is out 3 weeks due to the coronavirus restrictions put on the Big Ten. And I think the third string guy, so he's the backup, Mertz. And then the third string guy is called Wolf. He's also out. So they're to like a fourth string quarterback. The Wisconsin they're not that talented. They could lose. I believe they play Purdue. I think they also play Michigan, and that's before Mertz can come back. They could lose one, if not possibly both those games. And so then does Wisconsin even make it as the opponent? And everyone else in the West is just not very good this year. Clearly Nebraska got blown off the field by Ohio State. Iowa's 0-2. Minnesota's look terrible. They're 0-2. Purdue's 2-0, but they're a limited team. I just think they have limitations on especially the defensive side of the ball. Northwestern's 2-0, but they're still, last year they were the worst team in the Big Ten. So they're better this year. And they have a better offense, and they've definitely looked better. But they still have limitations. And then who else am I missing in the Big Ten? I think it's Illinois. Is not any good. I think just the Big Ten West is not that good this year. Who knows comes out? I would say Wisconsin, and I think Wisconsin would be probably the second best team in the Big Ten with Graham Mertz playing like he did week 1. But I don't know. I don't with him out and with all the obviously they had a game canceled. They've had to shut down practice for a week. I have my doubts about Wisconsin being able to even recover, and I think they're going to lose a couple games. And therefore, who knows where represents the West. So at the end of the day, I think it's a 9-0 Penn State, Ohio State team, and I think they end up being in the college football playoff. Never know. It's football. But I would be shocked. They just best quarterback in the conference, one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, best wide receiver group, hands down in the conference, one of the best in the nation. They have Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, and they're even playing guys like Jackson Nadigbo and Julian Fleming, and those are 5-star elite wide receivers. So this is a deep, good, great team, and the defensive line look good. They got a lot of pressure on Clifford. They have a great offensive line. The running backs, Master Teague and Trey Sermons had a solid game against Penn State. Um, I just don't see them losing. So I hate to pencil anyone in, but 9-0, they'll make the playoff. The committee's going to play 9-0 Ohio State. Is kind of a no-brainer. The rest of the games in the weekend, I'm not going to touch on every one, but the ones that I saw a little bit of Michigan State. Michigan, great victory for Michigan State. They lost to Rutgers. I thought this team, I'm like, this is a team that might be, I think I even predicted not to be that good this year, but I'm like, they might be 1-8, 0-9. Heck, went in to Michigan, no fans. Let's touch on that quickly. I'm wondering how the fans is going to make a difference, the no fans versus fans. So far in the Big Ten, 6 victories by the home team, 7 by the road team. So through 2 weeks of data, having no fans makes a difference. Basically, it's a neutral site game. So we'll see how it is moving forwards. But last week, 1-5. Road team won 5 games. 1 victory by the home team. So we'll see how it is moving forward. Northwestern Iowa, good victory by Northwestern. Didn't see the game, so I'm not going to make much comments on it. But I was lost the first 2 games. I was wondering how they're going to be this year. They had some off-field stuff, and they're 0-2. Purdue beat Illinois 31-24. And once again, Illinois is not a good team. I question how good Purdue is. Indiana with a 37-21 victory. Remember, Rutgers won week 1 over Michigan State. Michigan State beat Michigan. It's not all reciprocal, but I don't know. Indiana could be a pretty good team. Ohio State wins, and that was it. 1, 2, 3. I thought there was I missed the Friday game. What's the Friday game? I don't have it on here. Oh, Minnesota versus Maryland. Good victory by Maryland. They look terrible. Got blown off the field against Northwestern. I thought 0-9 season. Beat Minnesota. Tua Tagovailoa. I've not been able to say their names. I'm terrible at saying names. Can't say their names for the life of me. Anyways, great game. Threw 5 touchdowns. Was the Big Ten, I believe he was the Big Ten Player of the Week. Minnesota, I don't think they're that good. They don't have a good defense. They have a really bad defense. I think they're through 2 games, they're bottom 10 defense in college football, and probably I think the bottom defense in Power 5. So this is a bad defense, and I saw them. They're not good. They lost some key pieces, and it's I don't know. I don't know how they're going to stop people. I don't think they're as good offensively as people thought either. So yeah. So shocker, Ohio State. Who's second best? I think it's Wisconsin with a healthy Graham Mertz. He's not healthy. The whole team is not healthy. I just hope they can get back and start playing. I hope they're able to get healthy and play Purdue this week. It sucked to lose 2 games. Remember, the Big Ten, if your game doesn't get postponed, it gets canceled. So they lost a game. They might lose another game. And I was excited to see Nebraska versus Wisconsin. So that's unfortunate for Nebraska, honestly, because they were fine. But it is what it is in this COVID season. So my prediction is this upcoming week, I'm just going to do a little quick prediction on the games. Michigan State, Iowa. I mean, Michigan State looked good last week. For some reason, I think 2 losses. I think Iowa's going to come out. I think they're going to beat them. I still think they're probably a little better team. But I don't know. 0-2, 2 close losses. Indiana versus Michigan. I had a feeling Michigan's going to bounce back and win this week. I mean, they kind of have to. But Indiana's not bad. They found a way to win the first 2 games, and a great victory over Penn State that week 1. Penn State's going to come back and win this week. They're on to a tough loss versus Indiana, obviously playing a very good Ohio State team. Minnesota, Illinois. Man, hard to trust Minnesota right now, but I think Illinois is a really bad team. So I'm going to go Minnesota. Purdue against Wisconsin. I hope that game happens. If it does, I still think Wisconsin will figure out a way to beat Purdue. I just think they're a better football team. And I think they can do enough on the ground and keep it easy on the quarterback. I would still take Wisconsin, even with a 4-string quarterback. But we will see. Rutgers versus Ohio State. Good story, Rutgers. You're going to get blown out. Nebraska versus Northwestern. Nebraska, I liked some things they did against Ohio State. I think they're going to come out. I think they've missed last week. I think this is going to be a hungry team. I think they beat Northwestern. And I did a couple guys that had targeting penalties, so they were supposed to miss the first half of the Wisconsin game. I wonder if that is negated because of the cancellation. Just a thought. A couple starting secondary guys. Yes, I like Nebraska. I think they're going to win that game. I know Northwestern's 2-0, but I think they have a lot to play for. That's going to cover the Big Ten so far. Not a lot of surprises through 2 weeks. Minnesota's a little worse than I thought. That's a little bit of a surprise. I didn't think Michigan was going to lose to Michigan State. That was a little bit of a surprise. Indiana with upset over Penn State surprised me a little bit. That's about it. And those weren't crazy surprises. I was thinking about picking Indiana to win that game. So it's not a crazy surprise. And I think it's kind of chalk right now. Let's talk Pac-12. Is everyone ready? Pac-12. Everyone thought the Pac-12 wasn't going to play this year, and they're going to take the year off, and they were going to, protest. I don't know. I'm not going to go there. Election day tomorrow, folks. Don't want to go there. Anyways, but I the left coast just don't know what they're going to do. But they played, and they got season going November 7th. A couple weeks later in the Big Ten, a couple weeks later in the Mountain West. Mountain West, it's in the West. They have California schools. Whatever. Started 2 weeks later. Poorly run conference. Pac-12, but they're going to play 6 games plus 1, so the Big Ten is the 8 games plus 1. I've kind of already talked over a couple episodes ago. Obviously, I talked with Hifliday from Addicted to Quack. I also talked, I think, when I did my own show, I talked about what I thought about what was going to happen in the Big Ten. Big Ten. Oh, Pac-12. Covering 2 conferences. It's getting late, guys. It's 9-18 here. And there's not really anything right now that's changing my mind. I try to follow the team boards. I try to follow as much access as people are getting right now to practices, which isn't much because of COVID. They're just kind of doing Zoom meets with the coaches and the players. So there's not a ton of information to gather right now. But I'm trying to gather as much as I can. Obviously, know Oregon the best. I can tell you their 2-date came out today. So I can kind of give you probably the most solid information on them, less on the other teams. But I kind of have a good idea. Definitely have a good idea for the most part, what the production teams are bringing back, what recruits they brought in the last several cycles, especially the last, pretty dialed into what overall is coming to the Pac-12. I keep saying Big Ten. Pac-12 for the last 3 to 4 cycles. So I pretty much have a pretty good handle on what the roster is going to look like. You hear some, I would say the national media is definitely favoring Oregon. Now, some of the Pac-12 more centered stuff, John Wilner of the Mercury News, who does a terrific job. Some of those folks are actually not as much. They think Oregon's a little overrated. They think Oregon is not good. He's Wilner straight and pick him to win the North. But where I have an advantage over Wilner is I actually know the roster. I have a little better of idea who's going to be the guys who are actually going to be playing and who opted out and impact. There's been a lot of talk about the opt-outs regarding Oregon. I think Oregon was going to come into this season a substantial favorite. I think most of the FBI predictions by like ESPN, the predictions by like 247, it was not. It was not really that close. I think people just thought, you had the best offensive tackle in college football in Penei Sewell. You had unquestionably the best defense in the Pac-12, one of the best defenses in college football. Guys like Kayvon Thibodeau and Jevon Holland and just the momentum. They won the Pac-12 last year. They won the Rose Bowl. They've had the number 1 recruiting class the last 2 years. They were number 2 3 years ago. So their 3-year average is the best in the Pac-12. So most talent in recent years, successful on-field play. Very good coaches. I mean, Andy Avalos is one of the better defensive coordinators in the Pac-12, if not America. Future head coach in the next couple of years. Joe Moorhead, who was the innovative offensive mind at Penn State the year they went to the Rose Bowl and won the Big Ten. So I just think a lot of factors factored into them being a substantial favorite. Now, they were going to play Ohio State. And as much as I want to give Oregon every game, I was not going to pick them at even at Alston Stadium to beat Ohio State. I just think Ohio State's just still better right now and better, and they have one of the best quarterbacks. And I was not going to pick them to win that game. So then for Oregon to go to the playoff, if they lose to Ohio State, they're going to have to win the rest of their games. And they had some good, solid games in their schedule. USC and Arizona State and Utah. Well, no, Utah was in that there was the second revision, now this third revision, so I forget. But so it was going to be hard to run the table. Obviously, they were unable to do it last year after they lost to Auburn. Long story short, COVID happened, season gets canceled or postponed. Well, Oregon got hit with opt-outs more than anyone else in the Pac-12 and probably second most to anyone except for maybe LSU in the nation. That great offensive tackle, Penei Sewell, we talked about earlier, he's gone. He opted out. Jevon Holland, possibly the best nickel safety in college football, he opted out. 3-year starter in Thomas Graham, quarterback, he opted out. Brady Brees, Rose Bowl MVP, starting safety, he opted out. That brought what was a substantial favorite back to the Pac, more so. Now, from my perspective, I still know what's on the roster. They still have the second most talented roster on paper to only USC. And call me a skeptic. So USC is probably the one that's closest to being, I would say Oregon is still a slight favorite, and then USC is close. So USC is definitely considered the favorite in the South. USC had to opt out of J. Tufele, who's a all Pac-12 nose tackle. But other than that, they didn't lose much opt-outs. They bring back a lot of production on the offensive side of the ball. They actually bring back a lot of production on the defensive side of the ball. Still call me a skeptic on USC because USC, since the 247 team talent composite was invented, however you want to put it, since the inception of the 247 team talent composite. There's a good word. The inception. USC has had a top 5 roster in all of college football based upon baseline talent. So whatever the composite rankings for each roster is, USC every single season has been top 5, except for this one. They're actually number 10 nationally. So this is technically the least talented roster for USC in the 247 team talent composite era. Well, in the other 5 seasons, USC has finished respectively 8-6, bowl loss, 10-3, Rose Bowl victory, 11-3, won the Pac-12, lost in the Cotton Bowl, 5-7, 8-5, bowl lost in the Holiday Bowl. I'm going off my memory. I believe they finished in the top 25. Obviously, 2 of those years, only in the 1 year that they won the Rose Bowl, I think they finished maybe in the top 5. But that's Clay Helton as the head coach in all 5 of those seasons. That is not, when you have a top 5 roster, you're expecting in a conference that no other team for the most part has even had a top 15 roster. I think UCLA maybe 1 or 2 years had a top 15. Other than that, no other team in the Pac-12 had a top 15 roster based on baseline talent. Well, in those years since the inception of 247 team composite, Washington has won more games. Stanford has won more games. Oregon has won as many games. And Utah, I believe, and I'm going off the top of my head, has won about as many games. So USC has been more towards I think they fall around like 4th with having the best roster. So they have not, for the most part, played up to that talent. The 1 year that they had the run with Sam Darnold, they had Adoree Jackson, they had Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, obviously a very talented roster, several first-round guys, a first-round quarterback. They were able to make that Rose Bowl run. They had a pretty good team that year. I think they would have even possibly been a decent challenger in the playoff. Washington actually went to the playoff, got boat raced by Alabama. USC actually beat Washington. But USC had a bad start. They lost the first 3 games, got killed by Alabama in the opening game. They also lost to Utah, and I think they lost to, I can't remember who else. But other than that, even the year that they were 11-3 and won the Pac-12, they were a very inconsistent team. They lost to Washington State. They got killed by Notre Dame, and then they got killed by Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. So USC has not necessarily played up to their talent for most of the seasons. And the last 2, not at all. Last 2 years, they 5-7, didn't even make the bowl game. And last year, they were 8-5 and got smoked by Iowa in the Holiday Bowl. And neither of those years did they finish, obviously, in the top 25. So less talented roster by a baseline, and expecting them to all of a sudden go 7-0 and win the Pac-12, call me skeptical. Now, I still like some stuff about their team. I like love with the wide receiver core of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Vaughns, Drake London. Keaton Slovis, I would consider the top returning quarterback in the Pac-12. They have a couple good offensive linemen. Elijah Vera Tucker is a guy that is a big-time player. He's probably going to be an early-round NFL guy. On defense, they have a new defensive coordinator. Their defense has been consistently inconsistent. They have, at times, been just not good. Despite having really good talent, they've been one of the bottom they've been the bottom half of the Pac-12 back. They have been at the bottom of the Pac-12 in regards to rush defense, stopping the run. They've really struggled. In the pass defense, they have had the propensity to give up big plays. Now, some of those D-backs were young, and they have matured, and they've actually obviously played. I really like a guy like Talanoa Hufanga. He plays safety. He's a really good player. Outside linebacker Drake Jackson is a big-time guy. He was the All Pac-12 last year as a true freshman. The rest of the Paul Gaete it was a high recruit as a linebacker. Elijah Griffin, Chris Steele, a couple of highly regarded recruits, haven't necessarily played up to the recruiting ranking, but they're talented. We'll see. We will see with USC. I think the first test will come this week against Arizona State. Arizona State was a team that obviously kind of rode high at the end of last year. They upset Oregon, knocked them out of the playoffs. They have an exciting young quarterback in Jaden Daniels. I think they're getting a lot of hype behind them. I saw their 2 deep today, and their wide receiver core has some talent, but most of the guys that are going to be playing are true freshmen. The same for their running back position. Highly regarded guys that are talented, but they're true freshmen. And to win at the Power 5 level with playing true freshmen, there's just going to be some growing pains. It's just part of life in college football in general. And the offensive line was just very inconsistent last year. They had some guys transfer in, and they're starting, I forget the guy's name. He's transferred in from Texas A&M, but he wasn't playing at A&M. He transferred because he wasn't playing. Now he started at Arizona State. And A&M didn't exactly have a terrific O-line last year. So this is not a good O-line. They had trouble rushing the ball, and they have young running backs, and they had a really good running back, Benjamin, who's now in the NFL, and they had trouble running. Younger receivers, Frank Darby's the oldest one coming back. I think he's a pretty good player. I don't think he's a big-time receiver. I don't think he's a Brandon Ayuk. I don't think he's a N'Keal Harry, the 2 first-round guys that left the last couple of years. Defensively, they got some talent. They had some secondary, Cross White, Jones, Chase Lucas. These guys were pretty regarded as recruits. Been kind of inconsistent. Their defense has not been bad, though. They've had an ability to get after the passer. They've had the ability to make plays in the passing game. forcing teams to turn the ball over. They forced Oregon into some very ill-advised turnovers. Justin Herbert actually had a couple turnovers there in the third quarter that kind of put the caboose in that game. But long story short, I still don't love this Arizona State team. But first game of the season, 9 o'clock kickoff Pacific time, going up against USC. There's something about you. It seems like USC is just gonna. Arizona State also, when they shut down the season, the athletes stayed on campus and actually continued to practice at Arizona State. They didn't in states like California, Oregon, Washington. They had more restrictions because they really couldn't play outside, so they sent them home. Could that be advantageous for the first game of the season that they got that extra time together, were able to prepare maybe a little bit better, and we're kind of able to seamlessly go into fall camp? It could, and especially in an early morning game, first game of the season, there's something about that game that makes me want to pick Arizona State. I still think Arizona State's a flawed team. I do not think under any circumstances that Arizona State's going to go 7-0. I think they lose at least 2 games. I could. Or third, they could lose to Cal. They could lose to Washington. If they finish first, they could definitely lose to Oregon. I'm obviously saying that picking Oregon because they're gonna win it. Sorry, everyone else. Oregon's out of the north, but I could see Arizona State going in and beating USC, because that would be a Clay Helton kind of team move to do, to lose that first game. And right there, pretty much the Pac-12 to make the college football playoff has to win all 7 games. One loss, you're not making the playoff. Because they started late, they only get to play 7 games. The Pac-12 already doesn't have exactly the most stellar reputation when it comes to the Power 5. They're not the SEC. They're not the Big Ten. Shoot, I don't think they're ACC. I think they're as good as the Big 12, but who knows? I mean, they have only made the college football playoff twice since its inception. They haven't made it in the last 3 seasons. And honestly, they haven't had the teams haven't been great. I mean, Oregon is my team, and they just weren't quite good enough last year. They were just a little bit step below, and they didn't make it. They lost an Auburn game they should have won. They lost an Arizona State game they should have won. They also won a couple games that they probably could have lost. They could have lost to Washington State. They won the last second field goal. They were down to Washington. They came back and won. They got outplayed, I think, a lot of points in that Wisconsin game. They found a way to win. So they actually won games that they probably shouldn't have, and they lost a couple games that they probably should have. And then Oregon would have gotten smacked by LSU. They would have gotten smacked as bad as Oklahoma. So I think the Pac-12 has to go 7-0. And it would even behoove them, if it gets to being too close, 1 loss SEC non-champion, 1 loss Notre Dame, I don't know. Thinking of some different teams with 1 losses that people could be like, I just think they're better than that team. I still will maintain, despite the opt-outs, the team that I trust the most, and it's not just because it's my team, but I trust Oregon. They're the second most talented roster in regards to baseline talent, second most talented roster in the Pac-12. When I did an article on the sportscast.net, and I rated each position. I had a tie between USC and a tie between Oregon, and actually USC was slightly ahead when I did the actual position rank. So when I rated quarterback position, running back position, wide receiver, and pass catchers, wide receiver and tight end, offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, secondary, actually USC was slightly ahead, but then I did coaching impact, and I had Oregon having the second best. I gave the best to Utah because Kyle Whittingham's just been such a good coach for so long, and Shelley, his DC, has been such a good defensive coordinator for so long. The OC was a long-time offensive coordinator in the Pac-12. I just think that that's a pretty good program, great strength and conditioning program. I like how they do it. So I ranked them first, but I ranked Oregon second. And I might even schematically consider in some ways Oregon even better. I mean, Joe Moorhead was a big-time OC. That's why I got the head coaching job at Mississippi State. He transformed Penn State from a meddling offense to one of the best offenses in college football, Big Ten champion, Rose Bowl team. He's the OC, Andy Avalos. It was a great defensive mind at Boise State, got the job at Oregon. In 1 year, he transformed them into a top 10 defense as far as efficiency, top 10 defense in as far as havoc, which is getting after the quarterback hurries, tackles for loss, top 10 in turnover production, the plus minus defense to offense. And they were top 10, I believe, in scoring defense off the top of my head. It's such a transformation. I mean, Oregon used to be terrible defensively. Jim Leavitt came in after the new staff was hired and did a better job. The defense definitely improved, but they still were not a top 25 defense. Then all of a sudden, Navels comes in. He takes what had been very good. They've recruited very well on the defensive side of the ball. Let's be honest. They've recruited very well. And they even, the best recruits that came in the 2020 cycle, defensive guys. 5-star Noah Sewell, linebacker. 5-star Justin Flo, linebacker. 5-star cornerback Dante Manning. JUCO All-American Bennett Williams. So they have done just a terrific job on the defensive side of the ball. And then that's not even counting probably the best pass rusher in the conference, Kayvon Thibodeau. A couple 3-year starters in Austin Value and Jordan Scott on the defensive line. Ezek Matataia is one of the top returning tacklers in the Pac-12. Diamond Lenore, second team All Pac-12, 2-year starter at cornerback position. They have some really good players on the defensive side of the ball. They have recruited well. I would put my trust, if I just looked at this, I'm trying to that's my team that I favor, the team I'm rooting for. But if I just try to look at it just as pragmatically as possible, I just trust Oregon against USC, because I think if they both get hit in the mouth, I trust a Mario Cristobal coach team over Kelly Helton. I think Cristobal is a better culture guy. I think Cristobal is going to have his guys play tougher and harder. And I think if it's a close game, I'm taking Oregon. But I've said this, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. I have Oregon winning the Pac-12, and I actually have them going 7-0. I don't have them losing this year. The games I'm obviously. The schedule is actually very advantageous, because the question marks they have is they're replacing their whole offensive line and they're replacing the quarterback position. Oh, you're like, you need a schedule that can help you out. Well, as much as playing a conference-only schedule, remember, conference-only, you're playing all Power 5 teams, so that's still pretty difficult. But if there's align the stars, the conference-only would be play teams that don't have great defenses. Play teams that don't. Well, Stanford last year had a bottom half defense in the Pac-12. That's their first opponent. Washington State had a bottom half defense in the Pac-12. That's their second opponent. UCLA had a bottom half defense in the Pac-12. That's their third opponent. Oregon State had a bottom half. So of the first 4 games, other than maybe throwing in a Colorado or Arizona, this is about the 4 best you can schedule specifically against our offense, because I think it takes a little time to gel as an offensive unit, a new quarterback, but they're playing against teams that I just don't think are great. I don't think they're that talented on the defensive side of the ball. I think they'll be able to generate some points and be able to do well. And the thing is, you have a great defense. One thing I know we have is a great defense. And now some of those teams, I like the offense of Stanford. They have a good quarterback, good wide receivers, decent running backs, decent offensive line. They probably could score, but Oregon has good defense. I'm not that worried. I'm not so worried about them giving up a ton of points. Washington State, new coach, new offensive system, new quarterback, all of that. They might, second game of the season, they might not be clicking on all cylinders. Now, they had a great offense last year, new system. I like their defense going against that. Third game of the season, UCLA. Have they been good offensively since Chip Kelly got there? Not really. They've had a bottom half offense. Will it change? They haven't necessarily recruited good. They're bringing back some guys that have experience but minimal production. So I don't know. Lost some good offensive linemen. One guy to the portal and went to Baylor. So I don't think they're going to be that great offensively. And then Oregon State had good offense last year. Now they replaced quarterback, placed some key targets at wide receiver. They don't necessarily recruit at a high level, so that might impact it a little bit. We'll see. I call me in the wait and see mode. And then Cal and Washington are better teams, and they definitely have better defenses, especially Washington. It's close between them and Oregon for the best defense in the Pac-12. But if they can get that offense up to par, which I think they can, I trust Joe Moorhead. I trust Mario Cristobal. I think by the fifth and sixth game, when they play a little better teams, a little better defenses, that at least the offense will have those games in their belt, and I think they'll be ready for it. If they had to play Washington game one, if the stars align that way, that's not a great team to start your new offensive line and new quarterback against. That would be a game that could be a possible upset. An ugly game. I love Washington's offense, but it would be one of those ugly games. Well, that didn't happen, and I think the stars aligned, and I think that Oregon can, they're good against good, they can win it. They're bad against bad, or they're unknown versus bad. I think they can do fine. And that's why I'm pretty bullish. I think they're 6-0, and then I do think USC comes out of the South. Despite them being the heavy favorite, despite actually a decent amount of people are favoring USC over Oregon, I don't even know if USC for sure is going to win the South. Clay Helton loses to Arizona State. Let's just say hypothetically. Then all of a sudden loses to Utah. All of a sudden they're a 2-loss team. They probably don't win South. Maybe Utah does. That's a good program. They're replacing a lot, but kind of trust Kyle Whittingham to have a decent team. Arizona State. I think they have holes. I don't think they're a complete team. I think they're a little overrated. But who knows? UCLA, Colorado, and Arizona are just not good. So I don't. Who knows though? Could UCLA be better? Could they go 3-3? 4? You never know. You don't totally know. I doubt Colorado, new coaching staff, and Arizona. They've just been bad. It's very doubtful that you see those teams being good. UCLA would be the one maybe, but I just don't see it. I'm going to pick USC, but I think they lose one game. I think they find a way to lose to Arizona State or Utah. Just think they find it. Good. And then Utah, probably new staff. They're a team that, who knows, could they go 5-1? Could they go 6-0? They're the one that I'm kind of like, if they be USC, could they then be winning the South? I don't know. And then Oregon's toughest teams, I do believe. I mean, believe it or not, Stanford, because of the talent on the offensive side of the ball, I think in the first game of the season, weird year, it's probably the game that I'm going a couple places with this. If I'm just going to say talent, like talent on a roster versus talent on this roster, Washington's closest to Oregon. Washington also has a very good defense. They have guys that are very good on their defense. So when I look at that, then I look at when I think of Washington, I think new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new offensive scheme, new quarterback. That's a lot, and an offense that wasn't very good last year. So not a very good offense, and you're replacing all those. I don't know. I just don't know how good they're going to be in the shortened season on offense. So they might win a lot of games, 10-7, but they could find themselves losing opening game to Cal. They've lost Cal the last 2 years. That's very possible. But talent, they match up. They have a good defense. They could force turnovers. they could, and that could change the reflection of the game. They have good enough players. Elijah Molden's one of the best defensive players in the Pac-12. Cal, I think Cal's a little overhyped. John Wilner from Mercury News picked Cal to win the North. And a lot of people are like, that's team to watch out for. They have a marginal offensive line. They're not very talented overall in the roster. They're not talented at the skill positions, especially a wide receiver. They lost a lot on defense. They lost their best defensive lineman, their best linebacker, their best defensive backs. And they don't recruit well. They have one of the bottom third talented rosters in the Pac-12, not just the Pac-12, but in all of college, in all the Power Five. I think that's a 3-3 team. I think they could win a game over like Washington, but could they beat Oregon? It is no really home field advantage. I'm like, oh, they're going to Cal. Maybe that's it. Dude, like I said, Big Ten, it's been like 50-50. It's basically a neutral field game. And I like what is on that team for Oregon a lot better than Cal. I just don't know how Cal can effectively move the ball on a consistent basis. Basically, Oregon can line up in the box, basically force them to pass. And I don't think their wide receiver, I mean, Garbers is not a bad player, but I think he'll be pressured. I think you will have to get the ball down the field. I don't think they'll necessarily beat him. I saw them play Oregon last year, and they really had trouble like beating them in the one-on-ones. I don't think it's going to be any different this year. I just don't know how they're going to score. I think and then their defense isn't that good. I think he's good at defensive coach, Wilcox, but I don't know. I think they're a little overrated. Washington has some major offensive issues. Oregon State's just never very talented. I think they're actually I like Jonathan Smith. I like his offensive coordinator. I like his overall staff. They're a little sneaky. They're a team that can win a couple games. If I were gonna, so I don't think like they're gonna beat Oregon State because they almost always do. I mean, they have won last decade. I don't know, they've lost them maybe one time, but Oregon State played pretty good last year. It wasn't until a late touchdown. It was a one-score game. Oregon did not play very well that game, but it was a tough game. I just think that so just to bluff that one, that I don't think they beat Oregon. I think that game is a little closer than maybe we would like. A rivalry game. And I think Oregon State's a little better. I would have to look specifically at their schedule. I haven't won the first game. I haven't beaten Washington State. I know that's game number one. I'm going Oregon State in that game. And I think they win a couple up more. I think they can take a couple more. I just think that's a team that they end up 3-3. Wouldn't shock me. I think Washington State, new coaching staff, they have had a lot of guys hit the portal. They never have a talented squad. I think Nick Rolovich is a pretty good coach. I think he's a pretty good offensive mind. Just don't see them being much of I just don't see them doing very well this year. I think this is going to be a tough year. And then, so it's Oregon State, Washington State, Cal, Washington. Who am I missing? Stanford. Stanford's going to win some games. I think there's enough good offense on that team. I think Davis Mills is one of the better quarterbacks, former 5-star. I like the wide receiver group of Michael Wilson, Connor Weddington, and Cyrus St. Brown. Solid running back, Austin Jones, E.J. Smith, the son of Emmitt Smith, might get some carries. They have some talented offensive linemen, good center, good right, I think it's right or left tackle, Foster Sarrell, former 5-star. I like some pieces in the offense. I don't love their defense at all. Talked about it earlier. They're not deep. I don't think they've recruited that well on that side of the ball. I just think overall their best defensive back, Paulson Adebo, went to the NFL. I think they're going to struggle to stop teams. I think they're a team that's going to have to score a lot to win. And I think they will. They're another team that's going to win some games. But when I look at most of the Pac-12, when I think of like Colorado, Colorado, Arizona, Washington State. They're the three teams that I just don't see them winning barely any games. One, maybe two games. If that. Is without thoroughly looking at their schedule. UCLA could sneak in a couple victories. Arizona, Colorado, who knows? Could they beat an Arizona State? Could they beat a Utah? Maybe. They're a team that is possible. Then at the top half of the South, I'd say Arizona State, Utah, USC, but I could see them all dropping a game. I could see them dropping two games. Wouldn't shock me, especially a team like Arizona State, if they ended up not being quite as good as people thought and ended up being like 3-3. Would not shock me. Utah, I think, is a really good program, really well-coached team. I think they're going to be at least a 4-2 team this year, and they could be 5-1. Outside chance of 6-0. The North, Washington State, I think, is going to be the bottom dweller. Then I think there's going to be some trading off. I think between Washington, Cal, Stanford, and Oregon State, there's going to be a couple of those games that the team that you don't think is going to win, a la Oregon State beat Washington, a la Stanford beats Cal. And that, I think that's, I maybe would pick Stanford straight up in that game. I think it's going to be a back and forth. I see there being a couple losses in there for all of them. Clearly, if they're trading back and forth. Washington State's the only team that I could possibly see not winning actually any games. I could see that. And then there's Oregon. I don't think they lose. I think they're 6-1. I'm picking them to play a 5-1 USC. I think they beat USC. And then I think Oregon's 7-0. And we will see. Is that enough to make the playoff? I'm not saying it is. No, I think they need a few things going in their favor. 10-0 Cincinnati. I don't know. This year, they maybe have more top 25 victories than Oregon. 10-0. BYU, I just don't think it plays a good enough schedule. I know they play Boise State this week, but I just don't think they play a good enough schedule. Cincinnati plays a better schedule. So, I don't know. But a 7-0 Oregon, depends on how they look. That's maybe where I'm a little more worried about. I think that Oregon, while being 7-0, I don't think they kill teams. I think they might beat I actually don't know if I have any victory being unbelievably lopsided. If I was going to pick off the top of my head, if I was going to pick Stanford, I have like 28-16, Washington State 35-17, UCLA probably is their biggest, widest margin victory, probably like 38-17, 42-31 against Oregon State, 28-21 over Cal, 24-17 over Washington, and then like a victory of 35-28 over USC. These are just kind of off the top of my head. I'm just kind of throwing what kind of is a baseline. Well, touchdown victory over Cal, USC, and Washington. 10-plus victory over Stanford, and then the bigger victory and Oregon State, and then a couple touchdown victories over Washington State and UCLA. But is that enough to average about 13-point victories? Well, you'll say that, they won all their games. They, look good enough. I don't know if that's enough, if there's enough other good teams still close enough with maybe a one-loss, maybe even a two-loss SEC team, maybe a one-loss A&M, one-loss Notre Dame. There's just a few situations where I could see them being like, I don't think Oregon's good enough, and they only played 7 games. But I'm picking them to win it all. I just trust Mario Cristobal. I think he's a great culture builder. I think he's recruited extremely well. I think he's not just recruited. I think he's managed his roster very well. I think guys have gotten a lot of reps. That's why I'm not so worried about the opt-outs, especially in the defensive backfield. So I've seen some places online where people are like, but see, have you seen all the people they've lost in the defensive backfield? They still have the best or second best defensive backfield in the Pac-12. They still have all-conference guy in Dalmado, Illinois. They still got all-conference level guy in McHale Wright. They still got two couple-year starters in Verone McKinley, Nick Pickett. They brought in a couple transfers that started before the Power 5 letter. Jordan Happel from Boise State, Bennett Williams, who was a freshman All-American in Illinois. They still have a lot of experience. They still have a lot of talent. And even like freshmen like DJ James, a cornerback, and Jamal Hill at nickel, and Steve Stevens, safety, they all played last year. So guys have played, guys have started, guys transferred in, that has started. I just think there's a lot of experience. I think they have more talent than pretty much everyone except for maybe USC. And I like their coaching staff. I like their head coach. I like their coordinators. There's just a lot to like about this Oregon team. And even though I do not think Oregon this year is as good as any Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. But I do think they can go undefeated, and I do think that could be good enough to get them into the fourth seed, and that could be good enough to go to the playoff. Do I think they would beat a hypothetical Alabama? No. No, I don't. I just think they're not quite there talent-wise. I don't think they have enough experience at key positions like quarterback, offensive line. I think they would lose significantly this year. Now, next year, where once again they're bringing in a top 5 recruiting class, and next year they're probably going to have a top 10 roster in regards to talent in a conference where they will be significantly the best. They do play Ohio State at Ohio State, but that is Justin Fields is gone. Just saying, he's gone. So a new quarterback, that might, even though it's on the road, who knows. I think next year, though, that Oregon team could be more of a threat against the top tier, not only with the talent on the roster, but also some really key experience they're going to bring back. This year, I would just be happy winning the Pac-12 and getting to the playoffs. Especially since we didn't even think there was going to be a season, especially with the opt-outs, and even with the guy, even though the opt-outs I think does lower their ceiling a little bit. I don't think it's great. I don't think they're going to beat any of those top 3 anyways. But I think now instead of maybe losing 35-21, they'd lose 35-10. So I just think there's still a gulf. So quickly, I'm just going to go through how I think this week's games are going to go, and then I'm done. I'm done, folks. You've heard enough of me. Go watch football this weekend. Go vote tomorrow. It's election day, guys. Come on. It's a big day. Don't ignore it. Watch where it goes. So, schedule, Pac-12. Well, I should know this. I should know the games off the top of my head. See if I can think of this. First game, ASU at USC. Man, I want to pick the upset. I think it can happen, but I can't pull the trigger. I do think USC is better. I think they have the better roster. I trust USC more. I'm going to go USC. But if ASU shocks them, I might kick myself and I might say, dang it, I could have pulled the trigger. It was so close. I almost pulled the trigger in the Indiana-Penn State game. I almost said, I think Indiana could get them the week before Penn State plays Ohio State. They did, and I didn't pull the trigger. I'm not going to pull it again. I think USC is better. But if it's an upset, I can see it. That weird time, first game, Clay Helton coached USC. There's a lot that I could see happening there. So I'm going to try to do this off the top of my head. UCLA at Colorado. I think UCLA. I just think Colorado, new coaching staff, new quarterback. They've been through a lot. Obviously, COVID season, no spring ball. I just don't think they're going to be very good this year. So I'm going to pick UCLA. I don't love UCLA. I have not liked them at all under Chip Kelly. I don't think they've really trended the right direction. Washington State, I believe, is it at Oregon State? Does it really matter? And once again, I was going to pull it up, and I'm just going off the top of my head. I think Oregon State wins. I like Jonathan Smith. I like his staff. I think Tristan Gebbia played last year in the game against Oregon. He was not the starter, but he did play. He didn't play that bad, actually. I think he's a good enough quarterback. He was a 4-star guy coming out. I think there's enough good players on the defensive side of the ball. I like Hamilcar Rashid. I like Avery Roberts. I like that kind of that linebacker group. I think they're going to be ready. I pick Oregon State in that game. Trying to move it down. Arizona versus Utah. I'm going to take Utah. It's at Utah. Now, Utah is replacing a lot. New quarterback, new running back, pretty much their whole defensive unit. It went off to the NFL and graduated. Obviously, a very good team last year that almost made the college football playoff until Oregon boat raced them in the Pac-12 championship. But I just trust Kyle Whittingham over Kevin Sumlin. I think Utah's a better roster. I actually know they do. I'm going to take Utah. I think the game might be a little closer than maybe for comfort, but I'm going to take Utah in that game. I'm going to do Cal Washington last. So I take UCLA, Oregon State. Man, doing this off the top of your head is tough. Utah. What game am I missing? Okay, I'm going to do Cal Washington. I was going to try to move that because it's maybe the best game other than ASU USC. But I think Cal Washington might be, like, if you're just looking for I might enjoy the Cal Washington, maybe just personal. It's at Cal. It doesn't really matter. Cal's beaten them the last 2 years. What I think Washington is better in regards to talent. I know they're better. But Cal returns their starting quarterback. They return most of their offense. I don't think their offense is great, but they return it. Washington, conversely, just has so many question marks. They don't even have a quarterback named as a starter. Who knows who the starter is going to be? They have like 4 guys battling it out. None of them have any playing time. They new wide receivers, new running back. Most of the offensive lines do. New offensive coordinator, new scheme, new head coach. There's a lot of question marks. I could just see but I think that Washington is such a good defense. I think they're going to come on. I think they're going to play some good defense. I don't think Cal's just very talented. I think this is going to be a low-scoring affair. I'm going to take Cal. I just think that offense has so many question marks that I think there's going to be some mistakes. And I think Wilcox is a good enough defensive coach that he's going to be able to create enough confusion on an offense that's just so many question marks, new everything in this weird season. I think that's enough to pull a really ugly victory for Cal. I'm talking 14-10, 14-13, 3-4 turnovers by Washington. Like that kind of game. I don't mind those kind of games. I was a defensive guy. I like good defense. 90-58 Big 12 stuff. Boring fest. Gosh, I'm missing. Okay, so I have all the – what game am I missing? Have to be missing a game. So I have Arizona, Colorado, UCLA, Arizona State, USC, Utah. No, I have to. Okay, it has to be everyone. I lost count somewhere in there. But the big game, Stanford versus Oregon, primetime game on ABC. Kurt Herbstreit, Chris Fowler doing the play-by-play. Who do I got? Stanford's going to stick it upset them. Oh my goodness. No, I'm just kidding. Stanford didn't have a good year last year. They're not necessarily trending in the right direction. They had a lot of transfers, I think something like 12. They had a couple key guys opt out. Walker Little, former 5-star, going to probably be a first-round pick. Paulson Adebo, terrific cornerback, probably an early day 2 pick. But I still like some guys they have an offense. I already mentioned it. I like their quarterback, Davis Mills. I like the receivers, Connor Wennington, Michael Wilson, Cyrus St. Brown. I like the running back, Austin Jones. I think they're still going to have trouble in that opening game against that Oregon defense. And there's no fans. So who cares about the home field advantage? I think they're going to have trouble. I think Thibodeau is going to cause some trouble in Funa. The pass rush, I think they're going to be able to slow down the run game. And I think they're going to force a couple turnovers. I think the offense for Oregon is going to be a little bit topsy-turvy. I think they're, a new quarterback, new offensive line. I think there's going to be some mistakes. I don't think they're going to turn the ball very much. I think there's just be some execution. I think they're maybe going to struggle. I want to say they're going to struggle running the ball, but Stanford does not have a good run defense, and they really have depth problems on that side. But I'm just going off of what I believe, a new offense that with a weird offseason, not as many spring practices. But at the same time, that offense has been going against the best defense in the Pac-12. And that, that's going to make competition. That makes you better. But I think by the second half, I think it's one of those games that first half, it's a 10 to – well, I already said 28-16. So I have it being like 7-7. Let's go that 7-7. People are like, man, Oregon's up. Then I think in the second half, Oregon starts being able to run the ball. Stanford defense tires. I think then they force a couple turnovers, and then they jump out to like a 28-7, like a 28-10 lead. Stanford gets a late touchdown. I have it 16, missed an extra point, whatever. But I think it's the second half. I think the depth of Oregon, I think the talent of Oregon's better. I think the defense of Oregon is just very good. And I think the second half, you finally see all of that kick in. And Oregon is a tough team. They're after Mario Cristobal. And since he's been there, most of the time when the games have been tough, he for the most part, he had that loss against Auburn, but for the most part, he's hung on there. He's won a lot of late games. He had a late victory over Washington his first year, late victory last year over Washington, late victory over Wisconsin. His team, for the most part, is pretty resilient, pretty tough. And that's what I like about Cristobal, like why I like him as a head coach, among other things. Great recruiter and all that. So I think Oregon's able to pull out that game 28-16. I don't think it's a great outing by Oregon, but I think it's enough to move on to next week. And I think they'll continue to get better week after week. That's my recap of the Pac-12. Tune in, guys. I'll be going over what I think. I'm very interested to see how the first week ends up. And Big Ten, I'm not forgot about you. Covered you for the first 20 minutes of the podcast. Some good games this week. Like I said, this is not the best week on the schedule, but Indiana, Michigan's a good game. And Nebraska and Northwestern's a solid game. So there's some good games in the Big Ten. I'll cover both next week. Going to definitely lock in on a little bit of the Oregon and the Pac-12, but then I'm definitely going to push on the Big Ten a little bit. And then the following week, preview all the games coming up. Maybe have a guest. Who should I have? Who should I have a guest? Someone recommend me someone. I'll take Big Ten, Pac-12. Doesn't matter. I'll take either conference. Anyways, guys, day before election, go vote. Let your voice be heard. Go to sportscast.net. Check out our articles and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Hit us up on YouTube or Periscope. All right, it's Tyler Turner Show, and I will see you next week. This week, I'm out. Have a good week, folks. College football is officially totally back.